Admiral Jack Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council building on Centauri Prime and felt his stomach twist into knots. The massive chamber stretched upward for hundreds of feet with gleaming walls that shifted colors like oil. On water, floating platforms held representatives from every corner of the galaxy, and each one looked down at him with expressions he could not read. Beside him, diplomat. Lisa Grant checked her datapad one final time. They had spent 3 years preparing for this moment and gathering proof that Earth deserved a place among the stars. Trade agreements with 12 different species sat in neat files. Testimonials from alien scientists who had worked with humans filled 3 storage drives. Evidence of technological breakthroughs that could benefit the entire galaxy took up another dozen files. The Zephyrians floated on their platform like living crystals that sang in harmonious tones. Their representative had seemed friendly during the preparation meetings. The Aquarians moved their tentacles in what Lisa had learned meant approval when they discussed Earth's ocean research programs. Even the proud bird-like Skylords had nodded their feathered heads when Admiral Morrison explained human space exploration achievements, but something felt wrong today. The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations in 100 different languages. Representatives avoided eye contact with the human delegation. The Corvani delegate who had shared drinks with Lisa just last week now stared at his platform's control panel as if it held the secrets of the universe. Council. Speaker Thek 7 rose from the central platform. The metallic being stood 12 feet tall with circuits visible beneath translucent skin. His voice echoed through the chamber without any warmth or emotion. "We have reviewed Earth's application for membership in the Galactic Council," he announced, and every conversation stopped. "The decision has been reached through careful deliberation and consultation with all member species." Morrison felt his hands clench into fists. 3 years of work came down to this moment. 3 years of traveling between worlds and learning alien customs and proving that humans could be trusted partners in galactic civilization. Earth's application for membership is denied. Thek 7 continued, and the words hit Morrison like a physical blow. Furthermore, this denial comes with a formal ban preventing future applications for membership consideration. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species made sounds that might have been approval, while others seemed shocked. Lisa grabbed Morrison's arm to steady herself as the full weight of the announcement sank in. "The reasons for this decision are as follows," Thek 7 said and raised one metallic hand for silence. "Humans demonstrate genetic predisposition toward violence and aggression that makes them unsuitable for peaceful galactic cooperation. Their cultural development shows patterns of warfare and conquest that pose risks to established galactic stability. Their technological advancement prioritizes military applications over beneficial scientific research. Most concerning is their dangerous curiosity that has already resulted in several problematic first contact incidents." Morrison wanted to shout that every species in this chamber had histories of conflict. The Skylords had conquered 6 star systems before joining the Council. The synthetic collective had been created during a war that destroyed their creators. Even the peaceful Verdants had territorial disputes that lasted centuries, but protocol demanded silence during official pronouncements. Morrison and Lisa could only stand and listen as their species was condemned by beings who barely knew them. "The voting results are as follows," Thek 7 announced. 847 votes against Earth's membership. 12 abstentions, 0 votes in favor. The numbers felt impossible. Not a single species out of hundreds had voted for humanity. Even the Corvani, who had seemed so supportive, had only abstained. Morrison looked around the chamber and saw some representatives already leaving their platforms as if the humans were no longer worth their attention. Security guards approached with the universal politeness that meant the meeting was over. They wore the blue uniforms of Galactic Council peacekeepers and carried energy weapons that could stun any known species. Morrison knew they would not use force unless the humans caused trouble, but their presence sent a clear message. As they walked toward the exit, Morrison heard Council member Vextal speaking to a group of colleagues. The insectoid being's translator made his words sound casual and dismissive. Humans will destroy themselves within a century anyway, he said with what passed for laughter among his species. Their aggression always turns inward when they lack external targets. Lisa's face went pale, but she kept walking. The long corridor to the docking bay stretched ahead like a tunnel to nowhere. Other delegates passed them without acknowledgement. 3 years of building relationships and earning respect had vanished in a single vote. The diplomatic vessel Horizon waited in the docking bay like a small piece of home. Captain Roy Davis met them at the airlock with questions in his eyes, but wisdom enough not to ask them yet. The ship's crew worked with quiet efficiency to prepare for departure, while Morrison and Lisa sat in the briefing room and stared at blank walls. "How do we tell them?" Lisa finally asked. "How do we go back to Earth and explain that we failed?" This completely Morrison had commanded fleets in battle and negotiated truces with hostile aliens, but he had no answer for her question. They would return home as the architects of the worst diplomatic failure in human history. The leaders who had trusted them with Earth's future would demand explanations they could not give. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks in hyperspace. Morrison spent the time writing his report and trying to find words that could explain the inexplicable. The Galactic Council had rejected humanity not for what they had done, but for what the aliens feared they might do. Fear had defeated logic and prejudice had overcome evidence when Horizon dropped out of hyperspace. Near Earth's moon, Morrison looked at the blue and white planet below and felt something he had not expected. Instead of shame or disappointment, he felt anger. Clean and pure and focused anger at beings who had judged humanity without truly knowing them. President Catherine Bell called an emergency session of the World Unity Assembly within hours of their arrival. Representatives from every nation gathered in New Geneva to hear the verdict. Morrison delivered his report in simple terms while Lisa provided the technical details of each vote and the reasoning behind the Council's decision. The assembly erupted in angry voices. Some representatives demanded immediate military action against Council worlds. Others suggested complete isolation from galactic affairs until Earth could prove itself through technological advancement. A few recommended waiting 50 years before trying again, but Dr. Kevin Wright raised his hand for recognition and the chamber gradually quieted. The xenobiologist had spent his career studying alien cultures and advocating for peaceful contact. His words carried weight even among the military representatives. "They rejected us because we don't fit their model of acceptable civilization," Wright said calmly. "They want species that follow their rules and accept their hierarchy and never challenge their assumptions about how galactic society should work." He paused and looked around the chamber with something that might have been a smile. "If they won't have us in their club, then maybe it's time to build a better one." 6 months after the rejection, Dr. Kevin Wright floated through the corridors of New Horizons Station and marveled at how quickly things could change. The converted space station hung in Earth's L4 Lagrange point like a silver flower blooming in the darkness between worlds. What had started as an abandoned mining platform was now the headquarters of humanity's boldest experiment. Wright pushed off from a wall and glided toward the main conference room where his team waited. Engineer Maya Patel looked up from her holographic displays showing communication arrays that could work in any atmosphere. Her designs used quantum entanglement principles that made traditional radio systems look like smoke signals. The breakthrough had come when she realized that most galactic species tried to force their biology onto their technology. Instead of adapting technology to work with different biologies, linguist Carlos Rodriguez sat beside her with translation. Matrices spread across 3 screens. His work went far beyond converting words from one language to another. He was building systems that could preserve the emotional and cultural meaning behind alien concepts. The Galactic Council used crude universal translators that often turned poetry into shopping lists and diplomatic nuance into blunt statements. Economist Helen Foster worked at a standing desk covered with trade models and resource allocation charts. Her task was perhaps the most difficult of all because she had to imagine an economy based on cooperation instead of exploitation. The Galactic Council operated on tribute systems where newer species served older ones for centuries before, gaining equal status. Foster was designing something that had never existed before in galactic history. Status report, Wright said as he settled into his chair at the head of the conference table. The team had been working 18-hour days for months, and their excitement was infectious. Each breakthrough brought them closer to proving that humanity could offer the galaxy something better than the rigid hierarchy that had rejected them. Communication systems are ready for field testing, Patel announced with pride in her voice. I've solved the atmospheric interference problem by using paired quantum particles. We can establish real-time communication with any species regardless of their environmental needs. The Galactic Council still uses relay stations that take hours or days to route messages between different atmospheric zones. Rodriguez nodded and pulled up his latest work on the central display. Translation protocols are functioning at 97% accuracy for emotional context preservation, he said. I tested them with the Aquarian refugees on Luna Base, and they said it was the first time any human technology had correctly interpreted their depth songs. The council translators always made their poetry sound like technical manuals. Foster's report was more complex but equally promising. I've identified the core problem with galactic economics, she began. The council system creates artificial scarcity to maintain power structures. Older species hoard resources and technology while newer members compete for scraps. But if we share everything freely, the overall wealth increases exponentially. Wright felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had driven him through decades of research. Show me the numbers, he said, and Foster activated a three-dimensional model that filled the center of the room. Current galactic trade involves 412 major resource flows, she explained as colored lines appeared in the hologram. 80% of those flows move from newer species to older ones, with minimal compensation. The remaining 20% consists of older species trading among themselves. The model shifted to show Foster's proposed alternative. But if we eliminate tribute requirements and create mutual benefit networks, the total resource availability increases by 300% within 10 years. Every species benefits, including the current council powers. Patel leaned forward to study the projection. The council won't like losing their advantage over newer species, she pointed out. They've spent millennia building their position at the top of the hierarchy. That's exactly why we need to reach out to the species they've rejected or marginalized, Wright replied. The galaxy is full of civilizations that don't fit the council's narrow definition of acceptable behavior. Rodriguez pulled up his research on rejected species applications. I've been analyzing council voting records for the past century, he said. They don't just reject dangerous or primitive species, they reject anyone who threatens their established order. The Nomad fleet was banned for refusing to settle on designated worlds. The Harmonists were deemed too naive for questioning military spending. The Ashanti were called too militaristic for maintaining their warrior traditions. Wright saw the pattern immediately. They're not building a galactic civilization, he realized. They're building a galactic empire where conformity matters more than contribution. The breakthrough moment came when Wright realized they needed to stop thinking like humans trying to join an alien organization. Instead, they needed to think like the founders of something entirely new. The Galactic Council had been built by the first few species to achieve interstellar travel, and they had designed it to serve their own interests. But what if someone designed a galactic organization to serve everyone's interests equally? We're going to call it the Stellar Commonwealth, Wright announced. Rotating leadership so no species dominates permanently. Shared resources so everyone benefits from technological advancement. Collaborative decision-making so conflicts get resolved through negotiation instead of force. Over the following weeks, they began reaching out to species that had been rejected or marginalized by the Galactic Council. Their first success came from an unexpected source. Captain Zara-9 commanded a small fleet of ships that wandered the outer rim, trading with anyone who would deal with them. She was a cybernetic being who had been exiled from the synthetic collective for questioning their rigid programming protocols. Zara-9's ship, Wanderer, docked with New Horizons Station on a Tuesday morning that would later be remembered as the beginning of everything. Wright met her in the main airlock and immediately understood why the synthetic collective had been afraid of her. She moved with fluid grace that seemed almost organic, and her optical sensors held intelligence that felt disturbingly alive. "I hear you humans are planning to compete with the Galactic Council," she said without preamble. Her voice had a musical quality that standard synthetic speech lacked. "My sources say you were rejected for being too aggressive and unpredictable." Wright smiled at the directness. "Our sources say you were exiled for being too independent and creative," he replied. "Perhaps we have something in common." Zaranine's optical array shifted to what Wright learned was amusement. "The Council fears change. Above all else," she said, "they've spent 3,000 years building their perfect system, and they don't want anyone pointing out its flaws." Through Zaranine, they made contact with the wanderer clans of the drifters who lived their entire lives in space and refused to acknowledge planetary governments. Their leader was an ancient being called Starwalker, whose species had been traveling between worlds since before the Council existed. The drifters had been banned not for violence or aggression, but for their refusal to accept territorial boundaries that made no sense in the vastness of space. Each new contact brought more species who had been rejected for failing to conform to Council expectations. The Ashanti were proud warriors who valued honor above profit. The Harmonists were telepathic pacifists who believed in resolving conflicts through emotional understanding. The Rockhounds were silicon-based miners who operated on geological timescales that seemed slow to organic species. Wright realized that the Galactic Council's greatest weakness was also their greatest opportunity. By rejecting every species that didn't fit their narrow template, the Council had created a vast pool of potential allies who shared one crucial thing in common. They had all been told they weren't good enough for galactic civilization. "They made a mistake when they rejected us," Wright told his team as they prepared to send out the first official invitations to join the Stellar Commonwealth. "They assumed that rejection would make us disappear. Instead, it just gave us motivation to build something better." 1 year after Earth's rejection, the first Stellar Commonwealth Convention opened aboard New Geneva Station with delegates from 15 different species. Dr. Wright stood at the observation deck watching ships arrive from across the galaxy and felt a mixture of pride and terror. Each vessel represented a species that had been rejected or marginalized by the Galactic Council, and they were all betting their futures on humanity's vision of something better. The Ashanti warship Bloodhawk docked with ceremonial precision while its crew performed honor rituals that had been passed down for 10,000 years. Captain Stormrider wore traditional battle armor decorated with trophies from 100 conflicts, but his eyes held intelligence that spoke of more than just warrior instincts. The Galactic Council had rejected the Ashanti for being too militaristic, but Wright saw their fierce loyalty and unbreakable codes of honor as strengths rather than weaknesses. Near the Ashanti ship, the Harmonist vessel Peaceful Current arrived in complete silence. The telepathic beings aboard needed no engines or guidance systems because they could sense gravitational fields through their mental abilities. Their leader was a being called Gentle Touch, whose thoughts radiated calm even through the stations. Mental shielding. The Council had called them too naive for galactic politics, but Wright knew their ability to sense emotional truth could prevent conflicts before they started. The Rockhound mining ship Heavy Stone took up an entire docking bay because their silicon-based crew needed specialized atmosphere and gravity systems. Their representative was called Deep Digger, and he moved with the patient deliberation of a species that measured time in geological ages. The Council had rejected them for being too slow to adapt to galactic commerce, but their knowledge of mineral resources could make every Commonwealth world wealthy. Wright made his way to the main conference hall where delegates were already gathering. The massive chamber had been designed to accommodate every type of being that might want to join the Commonwealth. Atmospheric zones could be adjusted for different breathing requirements. Gravity fields could be modified for species that evolved on high or low gravity worlds. Translation systems preserved cultural meaning instead of just converting words, but despite all the careful planning, the convention nearly collapsed on the first day when Territorial disputes erupted between the Ashanti and the Rockhounds. The problem started during resource allocation discussions when both species claimed mining rights to the same asteroid belt. The Ashanti argued that conquest gave them legitimate claim to any territory they could defend. The Rockhounds insisted that mineral rights belonged to whoever could extract resources most efficiently. Traditional diplomatic methods failed completely. The Ashanti saw compromise as weakness, while the Rockhounds viewed speed as wasteful. Neither species would accept arbitration from the humans or any other Commonwealth member. Both delegations prepared to withdraw from the convention, and Wright watched his dream of galactic cooperation dying before it had truly begun. That was when Marine Colonel Pete Nash surprised everyone by requesting permission to address both delegations. Nash was a veteran of Earth's unification wars, and his scarred face told stories of battles fought in every environment humans had encountered. Wright expected him to propose some kind of military solution, but Nash had something entirely different in mind. "I've fought over resources my entire career," Nash told the assembled delegates. "Fought for water rights in the Australian desert, and uranium deposits in the Antarctic ice and rare earth elements on lunar mining stations. Every time we treated territory as something to be won or lost, we ended up with dead soldiers and poisoned worlds." He activated a holographic display showing the disputed asteroid belt with detailed mineral surveys and gravitational analysis. "But what if we stopped thinking about this as your territory versus their territory and started thinking about it as our opportunity to build something that benefits everyone?" Nash's proposal was radically different from anything either species had considered. Instead of dividing the asteroid belt between the Ashanti and Rockhounds, he suggested joint mining operations with shared benefits and rotational territorial access. The Ashanti would provide security and rapid extraction capabilities, while the Rockhounds contributed deep mining expertise and long-term resource management. Environmental scientist Dr. Susan Kim added ecological protections that appealed to both species' cultural values. The Ashanti could honor their ancestors by preserving pristine asteroids as memorial sites, while the Rockhounds could practice their geological reverence by maintaining mineral formations for future generations. The solution worked because it transformed competition into collaboration. Instead of fighting over limited resources, both species could benefit from expanded capabilities. The Ashanti gained access to deep mining techniques that would have taken them centuries to develop, while the Rockhounds received security services that protected their valuable operations. More importantly, the success created a template for resolving future disputes. Wright realized that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their technology or military strength, but their ability to find creative solutions that turned zero-sum conflicts into win-win opportunities. As more species joined the Commonwealth, they faced their first major external test. The Galactic Council had initially ignored the Commonwealth as an insignificant collection of rejects and outcasts. But when trade reports showed Commonwealth worlds experiencing unprecedented prosperity, the Council's attitude changed quickly. Council Speaker Thek 7 issued an official warning that any species trading with Commonwealth members would face economic sanctions. Essential supply lines were cut off, and several newly joined species began reconsidering their membership. The Skylords worried about losing access to Council markets for their atmospheric control technology. The Verdant traders feared losing their traditional clients among Council worlds. Wright called an emergency session of Commonwealth leadership to address the crisis. Representatives gathered in the secure conference room aboard New Geneva Station while reports flooded in of Council ships blockading Commonwealth trade routes. Some delegates urged immediate military response, while others suggested negotiating a compromise with the Council, but humanity's response surprised everyone, including their own allies. Instead of retaliating against the trade embargo, Wright announced the launch of the Abundance Protocol. This was a massive resource-sharing network that would make Commonwealth worlds more prosperous than they had ever been under the Council system. The protocol combined human industrial capacity with alien technological innovation in ways that had never been attempted before. Ashanti mining operations provided raw materials that rockhound processors refined with perfect efficiency. Harmonist agricultural techniques increased food production while drifter transport networks distributed goods faster than any planetary shipping system. Most importantly, the protocol was designed to benefit everyone equally. New members received immediate access to all Commonwealth technologies and resources, while established members gained capabilities they could never have developed alone. The contrast with the Council's hierarchical tribute system was stark and obvious. The turning point came when Grove Singer Elm arrived at New Geneva Station aboard an unmarked vessel. The ancient Verdun was one of the Galactic Council's founding members, and his presence sent shockwaves through both Commonwealth and Council leadership. Elm had spent 3,000 years watching the Council evolve from a cooperative alliance into a rigid empire, and he was tired of watching promising species get crushed by bureaucratic fear. Many of us remember when the Council was young and hopeful, Elm told Wright during their secret meeting. We dreamed of bringing peace and prosperity to the galaxy through cooperation and mutual understanding. But somewhere along the way we became the very thing we originally opposed. Elm's revelation that many Council species were unhappy with the current system gave Wright hope that change was possible. The Commonwealth was not just building an alternative to the Galactic Council, but creating an example that Council species could follow when they were ready for something better. 2 years into the Commonwealth's existence, Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty and watched his worst nightmare unfold on the tactical display. The void spawn had emerged from dark space near the Outer Rim colonies, like a plague of crystalline locusts that consumed everything in their path. 3 Commonwealth worlds had already gone silent, and emergency broadcasts from evacuation fleets painted a picture of absolute devastation. Morrison had read the historical records from the Galactic Council archives. For 3,000 years, the Council had fought these entities in a grinding war of attrition that claimed billions of lives and dozens of civilizations. The void spawn appeared without warning from the empty spaces between galaxies and fed on energy and matter until entire star systems became cold and lifeless. Captain Angela Brooks reported from the sensor station with tension evident in her voice. Admiral, we're tracking 47 separate void spawn clusters moving toward Commonwealth space, she announced. The largest formation contains over 200 entities, and it's heading straight for New Geneva Station. Morrison felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. The Commonwealth Defense Fleet consisted of ships from 15 different species, but they had never faced anything like this threat. Most member worlds had joined the Commonwealth to escape Council politics, not to fight ancient cosmic horrors that devoured civilizations. The situation became more complicated when Council Speaker Vex 7 transmitted an official demand that Commonwealth forces withdraw immediately. The metallic being's image appeared on the main screen with its usual cold authority as it delivered the Council's ultimatum. The void spawn threat requires coordinated response from experienced military forces, Vex 7 announced. Commonwealth ships will withdraw from all affected systems and allow Council fleets to handle this crisis. Any interference with Council military operations will be considered an act of war. Morrison stared at the transmission in disbelief. The Galactic Council was demanding that humanity and its allies abandon threatened worlds and let Council forces handle the evacuation of Commonwealth citizens. When Morrison refused to comply, Vex 7 made the threat explicit. Council warships would enforce the withdrawal order with deadly force if necessary. The impossible choice lay before them like a trap, with no escape. Morrison could withdraw Commonwealth forces and watch Council ships arrive too late to save the Outer Rim colonies. Or he could fight a two-front war against both the Void Spawn and the most powerful military alliance in galactic history. Dr. Carlos Rodriguez provided the solution that changed everything. Working with harmonist telepaths and defector scientists from the Synthetic Collective, he had been analyzing communication patterns in the Void Spawn energy signatures. What he discovered contradicted 3,000 years of Council military doctrine. "Admiral, they're not mindless destroyers," Rodriguez announced over the comm system as his breakthrough analysis appeared on Morrison's command screen. "The Void Spawn are trying to communicate, but every previous attempt at contact failed because the Council only responded with military force. The data showed complex patterns in the energy emissions from Void Spawn clusters, mathematical sequences that resembled prime number calculations, gravitational fluctuations that matched harmonic frequencies used by several Commonwealth species for long-range communication. Most importantly, emotional resonances that the harmonist telepaths recognized as distress calls," Rodriguez explained his theory while Commonwealth and Council fleets moved toward inevitable confrontation. "The Void Spawn aren't invading our galaxy," he said. "They're refugees fleeing from something even worse in dark space. They've been trying to warn civilized species about a threat that's coming, but nobody ever listened to them." Morrison made the decision that would define the next phase of galactic history. Instead of preparing for battle, he ordered all Commonwealth ships to attempt communication with the nearest Void Spawn cluster. The Harmonist vessel Peaceful Current took point position while human scientists worked frantically to modify their translation systems for entities that existed as pure energy. The first successful communication with a Void Spawn entity shocked everyone involved. The being that identified itself as Ancient Warning spoke through modulated energy, patterns that bypassed normal hearing and transmitted directly into consciousness. Its message was both simple and terrifying. "Great darkness approaches," the entity communicated. "Star Eaters follow us. We seek safe harbor to warn those who live." Morrison felt pieces of a cosmic puzzle falling into place. The Void Spawn had been consuming energy and matter not from hunger but from desperation. They were trying to gather resources for a journey that had already lasted millennia while searching for someone who would listen to their warning about something called the Great Darkness. Commonwealth scientists worked with Void Spawn entities to develop new forms of energy that the crystalline beings could feed on without destroying inhabited worlds. The breakthrough came when Dr. Susan Kim realized that stellar radiation could be concentrated and refined into a form that sustained Void Spawn biology while actually improving the efficiency of nearby stars. The first energy farm was established in the Kepler system within hours of successful communication. Void Spawn clusters arranged themselves around the local star in complex geometric patterns while Commonwealth ships monitored the process. Instead of draining energy from the star, the Void Spawn somehow helped it burn cleaner and brighter than before. When Galactic Council fleets arrived expecting to find devastated Commonwealth worlds, they discovered something that challenged every assumption about the ancient enemy they had fought for millennia. Human children played in the shadow of towering Void Spawn crystals, while their parents worked alongside the entities to establish energy production facilities that benefited both species. The image that became famous throughout the galaxy showed 8-year-old Amy Carter offering a flower to a Void Spawn entity while her father, Dr. Nathan Carter, took readings from monitoring equipment. The crystalline being responded by creating a small light show that made the flower glow with rainbow colors while Amy laughed with delight. Council Admiral Zek Prime transmitted from his flagship with confusion evident even through his species. Emotionless communication style. "Commonwealth forces, explain your current tactical situation," he demanded. "Sensors indicate Void Spawn entities in close proximity to civilian populations but no combat activity." Morrison responded with data packets showing energy production rates and communication logs between humans and Void Spawn entities. "Admiral, we've discovered that the Void Spawn are not our enemies," he explained. "They're refugees who have been trying to warn us about a greater threat for thousands of years." The revelation forced both Commonwealth and Council forces to reconsider everything they thought they knew about galactic history. The Void Spawn had emerged from dark space not as conquerors but as survivors fleeing something so terrible that it had driven them across the cosmic void for millennia. As Commonwealth scientists worked to decode the full scope of the Void Spawn warning, Morrison realized that humanity had once again transformed a potential disaster into an opportunity for cooperation. The species that the Galactic Council had rejected for being too dangerous had just accomplished what 3,000 years of council military might had failed to achieve. They had turned the galaxy's greatest enemy into its newest ally while uncovering a threat that would require every civilization working together to survive. The Great Darkness was coming, and only united action could save them all. 5 years after Earth's rejection, President Catherine Bell stood before the greatest assembly in galactic history and felt the weight of countless worlds watching her every word. The emergency session aboard New Geneva Station brought together representatives from over 400 species, including secret delegates from dozens of galactic council worlds who had arrived in unmarked ships. The Great Darkness had been confirmed by every deep space observatory in the galaxy. A dark matter storm larger than most star clusters was moving toward their region of space at a significant fraction of light speed. When it arrived in 18 months, it would sterilize every world in a sphere encompassing both Commonwealth and Council territories. Bell looked out at the assembled delegates and saw the same fear in alien eyes that she felt in her own heart. The Zephyrian crystals had stopped singing their harmonious songs. The Aquarian tentacles moved in agitated patterns that spoke of deep anxiety. Even the ancient Verdans seemed shaken by the scope of the approaching catastrophe. "The universe doesn't care about our politics or our prejudices," Bell announced, and her words echoed through translation systems that preserved every nuance of meaning. "Today, we are all just living beings trying to survive. We offer our help, not because you deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do." The Galactic Council's response to the crisis had been predictably bureaucratic. Speaker Thek 7 had formed 17 different committees to study the problem, while council members argued over which species should bear the cost of evacuation efforts. 3 months of debate had produced nothing but detailed reports on the impossibility of evacuating 400 billion sentient beings. The Commonwealth responded within hours of confirming the threat. Operation Sanctuary launched as the largest evacuation and scientific effort in galactic history, with every member species contributing according to their abilities rather than their political status. Human colony ships worked alongside Council vessels that had secretly joined the operation. Commonwealth scientists shared their data freely with anyone who could use it to save lives. Dr. Kevin Wright coordinated the scientific response from his command center aboard New Geneva Station. The walls displayed real-time data from thousands of research teams spread across the galaxy as they worked frantically to find some way to deflect or survive the approaching storm. "Status report from all research divisions," Wright called out, and his team leaders responded with updates that painted a grim picture. The dark matter storm was too large to deflect and too fast to outrun. Traditional evacuation methods could save perhaps 10% of the threatened populations before the storm arrived. But breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration between human engineers and void spawn entities. The crystalline beings understood dark matter in ways that organic species had never imagined because they had been fleeing from it for millennia. Working together, they developed resonance patterns that could actually repel dark matter particles instead of simply blocking them. Engineer Maya Patel explained the theory while her hands danced over holographic controls that showed the galaxy-spanning project taking shape. "The void spawn can generate harmonic frequencies that create interference patterns in dark matter," she announced with excitement barely contained in her voice. "If we can amplify those frequencies using our technology, we might be able to push the storm away from inhabited systems." The plan required cooperation on a scale that had never been attempted in galactic history. Every world with advanced technology would need to contribute processing power and energy resources. Every species would need to share their most secret scientific knowledge. Most importantly, every civilization would need to trust their ancient enemies with the power to save or destroy them all. Grove Singer Elm had arrived openly this time as an official representative of the Verdant people. The ancient being stood before the assembly and spoke words that many thought they would never hear from a council founder. "The Galactic Council has failed in its most basic responsibility," Elm announced with sadness that transcended species barriers. We were created to protect and nurture galactic civilization, but we became guardians of our own power instead. Today we formally request membership in the Stellar Commonwealth and ask forgiveness for our pride and blindness, other council species followed the Verdant example as the reality of the approaching catastrophe made old prejudices seem insignificant. The Skylords brought their atmospheric control technology. The Synthetic Collective offered their vast computational networks. Even the proud Corvani swallowed their dignity and asked for Commonwealth assistance with their evacuation plans, but Speaker, VEC 7 and the Hardline Council leadership refused to admit failure. They launched a final, desperate attempt to maintain control by claiming that Commonwealth technology was untested and dangerous. VEC 7 broadcast warnings that human interference would make the crisis worse while Council military forces tried to seize control of critical research facilities. The confrontation ended when Admiral Morrison made a decision that defined his legacy. Instead of fighting Council forces, he ordered Commonwealth ships to protect both Council and Commonwealth worlds equally. Human Marines stood guard over Council evacuation sites, while Commonwealth medical teams treated Council refugees with the same care they gave their own people. The joint effort succeeded beyond all expectations. Resonance generators powered by every advanced civilization in the galaxy created interference patterns that pushed the dark matter storm away from inhabited systems. The cosmic threat that should have destroyed both Commonwealth and Council territories was deflected into empty space, where it could harm no one. More importantly, the cooperation required to save the galaxy created bonds that could not be broken by political differences. Council scientists who had worked alongside Commonwealth researchers could not return to the old system of secrecy and competition. Species that had protected each other during the crisis found it impossible to resume ancient grudges. Speaker, the X7 faced a choice between adaptation and irrelevance, as Council member after member openly joined the Commonwealth or demanded internal reforms. The final blow came when his own synthetic collective voted to remove him from leadership and request Commonwealth membership. Dr. Wright stood in the same chamber where Admiral Morrison had been rejected 5 years earlier and watched former enemies sign the new Cosmos Accords. The document officially merged the best aspects of both galactic governments into a new form of civilization based on rotating leadership and collaborative decision-making. The signing ceremony was simple but historic. Representatives from nearly every known species added their names or symbols or energy signatures to the founding document of a truly united galaxy. Wright thought about the journey from rejection to triumph and realized that being excluded from the old system had been the greatest gift the galaxy could have given humanity. As he signed the accords, Wright looked through the observation windows at ships from hundreds of worlds docked peacefully around New Geneva Station. Children from dozens of species played together in the station's gardens while their parents worked side by side on projects that would benefit everyone. Admiral Morrison spoke the final words as the unified fleet's first human commander. They said we were too dangerous to join their club, he announced with a smile that was visible even through his translator's holographic projection. They were right. We were dangerous to their way of thinking. And that made all the difference. The Stellar Commonwealth had grown from humanity's rejection into the foundation of a new galactic civilization, where cooperation mattered more than conquest and diversity was celebrated instead of feared. The species that had been banned from the Galactic Council had created something infinitely better in its place.